Hi there, you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast, the show I produce in Sydney, Australia, where I speak to leading guitarists and guitar figures from all around the world. My name's Matt Wakeling, and thank you so much for joining me for episode number 103. Now today I speak to Australian guitarist Nathan Cavaleri. Now Nathan is a remarkably soulful musician and a fantastic guitar player, and it was a real thrill to get to speak to him and hear more of his story. To give you a bit of context, Nathan started playing guitar at age 3, picking along with his dad's blues records. Facing leukemia at age 6, Cavaleri found solace in his guitar, and thanks to the Starlight Foundation, he got to meet and jam with Mark Knopfler. Now this was televised on national TV, and even at such a tender age, and whilst being still quite unwell, Cavaleri's affinity with the blues and his burgeoning talent was undeniable. Thankfully, by the age of 13, he received a clear bill of health. Now by this time he was a road veteran, having spent countless hours on national and international television, touring the world, sharing the stage with artists such as B.B. King, Robben Ford, Albert Collins, Steve Morse, Steve Cropper, Jimmy Barnes, Diesel and Tommy Emmanuel, to name just a few. Following a break from the spotlight in his late teens, Cavaleri returned fronting the blues rock band Nat Cole and the Kings. They were festival favourites all around Australia and releasing some fantastic records too. In 2014, he found himself unexpectedly struck down with adrenal fatigue and anxiety issues. In 2017, Cavaleri started writing a website and blog that detailed his return to the stage and the studio, and 2018 ended up being a really great year for Nathan, releasing new music, getting back into the studio and back on stage. It was great to sit down and discuss all of the above with Nathan in great detail, and he's an incredibly articulate and self-aware man, and I was very proud to have him as one of our guests on the Guitar Speaker podcast. So let's go straight to our conversation. Nathan Cavaleri, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Hey mate, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Man, very excited to speak to you. Now, I've been a fan of your blogs for the last couple of years, and on your latest one, you were reflecting on 2018, and you called it the year of action, which I thought was a pretty cool description of the year. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I suppose, when I burnt out probably in about 2011 or 12, and probably was heading that way for a few years. So when I pulled out of the music industry and just kind of decided to call it quits, and I didn't really have much intention of returning, that didn't really sit right with me, and that kind of decision to do that, it just felt unsettling, and that unsettled, those unsettled feelings sort of popped up in other areas of life, and that sort of fear and all that sort of spread into everywhere. So it kind of forced me during that period to re-examine things, learn about myself, learn, what things am I doing that, that's making my life better? What things am I doing that's kind of pulling me down? Which is quite a rabbit hole. It was just really a lot of learning, just trying to work out what I want to do, how do I want to spend my time in the future, how do I want to feel, and I had to, learn also the tools, to use to combat a lot of the stuff that I was going through, and to help get me to where I want to be. So essentially, 2017 was me dipping the toe in the water, after I sort of worked out, when I had that sort of clarity on where I wanted to move. It was just trialing it just to see. And then, I made that decision very early 2018, and I just want to get back into it and do it properly, and hence the year of action.
That's great. Now part of that was getting on the road again and releasing tracks from an upcoming EP. Let's talk about the EP first. What was the process there to get back into writing and recording?
Well, the one of the indications actually that I wasn't ready to fully turn my back forever on music was that I couldn't stop writing.
Okay.
You know, during that period, it was I was writing, you know, probably jamming to start off with, just, you know, by myself. It was kind of reminded me a little bit of how I started in music to begin with when I was a kid, where it wasn't about trying to make a career out of it. I had no idea how to release a song or record it or whatever. All I knew is that when I was in my bedroom or in the garage or whatever, it was fun. It's fun just putting stuff together, and I'd kind of, you know, I had 2 tape decks and I'd just go between the 2, you know, recording a guitar part and then recording a bass part and then just bouncing backwards and forwards. And that's kind of without intending to, that's kind of the space that I ended up back in, you know, during those sort of darker times where I was just in the bedroom, just riffing away or coming up with a melody, and until it would naturally, you know, expand into a song, and until I had, you know, probably 20 songs, and songs that I was really, really excited by. And that's what made me go, well, you know, it's now not fulfilling, like, for them to be sitting on a hard drive. I think I want to put these out or play them. I mean, that's where social media was actually pretty good as well, because it allowed me to share elements of the song during that sort of building process in a casual way. So
yeah, cool.
It was a gauge, you know, on so putting it out there, I get that rush of excitement, you get the feedback, you make people feel a certain way, and that's kind of was an early days indicator that I did want to perform again, you know, because back before social media, to put an idea out, like you had to go through a series of, you had to probably book a studio, record it. And then how are you going to get it to the people, other than maybe walking around with your CD and giving it to people? But you know, you put it. It's quite a big thing, but now you can just chuck it out there.
That is cool. I remember seeing some of those little video snippets you're putting out that you mentioned, and I think it was maybe you jammed with a drummer occasionally as well. I think I remember one track was just you and a drummer, you on guitar and singing, obviously, and it just sounded massive. And,
yeah.
So maybe that was some of the lead up work. So So you've released 2 songs already. Demons came out, I think, in August 2018, and then Rising Sun about a month ago, early December.
Yep.
Great tunes, man. Demons is obviously a very personal reflection and contemplative kind of tune.
That's right. Yeah, Demons. You know, Demons was written at that time where I kind of, it reminded me of all the things that I took for granted. And this is when I was in that dark place where all of a sudden, like, because I've, you know, my whole life I've always felt confident, fiery. I've had a lot of energy, passion, desire. So then on the other side of burning out, all that stuff disappeared. And it reminded me of what, you know, I need to be more grateful for, and also was, you know, it kind of provided me with a bit of a compass of what I want to work to get back to. So yeah, that's kind of essentially the nature of Demons, and I felt it kind of relevant to for that to be the first release, because I'd been blogging about a lot of that stuff for a couple of years now, and it felt like the right song to release. And then Rising Sun is a version of a Cold Chisel song. Which, it wasn't an easy decision to release it, because I mean, it can be musical suicide to do a version of a Cold Chisel song. You know, it's such a, you know, it's I put Cold Chisel in the, you know, with Led Zeppelin and all that. It's like, God, man, you want to be sure, and you want to be really, you know, digging what you're doing to something, and also offer a serious point of difference before you go and attempt to release a song like that. But it just felt right, and I'd got positive feedback in my immediate circle, and obviously there was the personal tie with Diesel and Jimmy and stuff with my career early on. So very cool.
Yeah, I mean, the point of difference, yeah, you totally spin it on its head. You break into more of a halftime groove, and I think you tuned to D, is that right, for that?
That's right, yeah, drop D and just kept it swampy. And I kind of, you know, that riff came about before it turned into Rising Sun. And
Okay, yep.
it was sitting in my, in my sort of collection for ages, and I just loved it. It was a type of riff I wouldn't normally make up, and I couldn't figure out what to put with it. Like, each time I try and write a lyric, I'm like, nah, it just wasn't working. And then I was, kind of sitting in the studio and jamming on it again, and literally the words of Rising Sun just came out. Yeah, and then, I kind of got, in terms of composition, I kind of got stuck with some of the chord changes, because that halftime groove didn't fully suit all the original chords.
Yeah, yep.
It felt predictable. It was like, oh, okay, cool. We're doing the same thing but slower, and it didn't really do too much for the tone and the sleaze as well. So I just, one of my favorite things to do is, take a melody that already exists and then move the chords around it. Go to sort of relative minors or majors, or, mess with it a bit. And it's just amazing, like, how much it transforms, and the emotion and the mood. It's ridiculous. And that's kind of sort of what I did with this one. And it was also about what things can I take out as well rather than put in. Wasn't it about shredding, doing a massive shred solo over it? I just wanted to go, what can I do over the top of this that's just cruisy, like channeling JJ Cale, in a modern way. Like, that's kind of, yeah. Otherwise, if I wanted to do the full energetic thing, I would have kept it like original and just thrashed it out, which is not
Sure.
what I was in the mood for. So.
Sure, yeah. No, I loved it. There's the 2/5 progression, but you just sit on the 2 instead. So there's that kind of subtractive thing you're doing with the chords, which are totally set on that swampy vibe. Man, the tone on that is killer. You got a fuzz in there somewhere? It's just this gnarly, swampy.
Oh, what am I using? It's interesting when I recorded, and this goes, for the rest of the EP as well. I demoed a lot of these songs up, well, all of them up, and a fair few of them were pretty spot on. But then it comes time where you go, all right, I want to do it for real. And you book the studio, you book the engineer, and all that type of stuff. And this is where it was really helpful having it co-produced with a guy called Tony Buchan. And, I had a lot of my sort of peeps around me just going, dude, you should produce it yourself. It's what you do. And I'm like, no, I need it. I want another pair of ears. I need an anchor, because you can go down a creative rabbit hole and just, I really need the security of somebody else that I trusted. So during that process, the amount of times that he said, no, go back to the demo guitar, go back to the demo vocal, or whatever was ridiculous. And it was because the energy, even though it might not have been recorded the best, it's the energy and the performance. So in this situation, Rising Sun, I did revert back for that main guitar to the demo, and I recorded it DI, straight into my Vintech preamp. I overloaded the Vintech preamp, and that's the type of fuzz that you're hearing.
Yeah,
and
cool.
It's going through an 1176, and that was it. And then I knew that I just wanted a bit more depth to it, because it was very DI. So then I reamped it, and just sent it through. What did I send it through? I think I sent it through my just my Vox AC15 Heritage and the Fender Pro. Yeah, that's right. I sent it to 2 of them, and just set up some room mics, and then I blended that with the DI.
Fantastic, man. That's so cool. Man, there's going to be a run on those preamps now. Everyone's going to want to buy one
Yeah.
lugging around.
Oh, they're great.
lugging
I mean,
gigs.
they're like the Neve copies, and they do it really well, you know. But it's, I don't know what happened, but particularly over the last year, I'm just getting, you know, massively turned on by driving preamp DI. It's just,
Wow, man. That's
yeah.
Beatles, man. That's great.
Well, yeah, and I think, and even like JJ Cale and all that, I think, you know, some of the amount of times where I've just gone to my amp and tried to get a really, really, you know, crystal clear, clean sound, or just a bit of a drive, and I want to keep it crispy, and then I've just plugged straight into the DI and gone, wow, no, that's it. Bit of EQ.
Fantastic, man. That's cool. You on both tracks, Rising Sun and Demons, you're very adept at swapping between slide and fingers. Is that something you've been doing for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably only paid a lot of attention to my slide playing over the last few years, actually. Like, I've always dabbled into it, but I've spent a lot more time on it over the last couple of years. I love it. I mean, it's just the slide. I've got a lot I need to brush up on, but the slide for me is just it's a feeling. It's like sometimes the fingers just don't do it. I want something that's a little bit more unusual, you know, one of my favorite things to do is actually, and it's in a couple songs to come, is to play a melody on the slide and then double it with fingers. So you kind of get
cool.
this almost like a modulated tape echoey type sound, and it really puts you into that Eagles sort of land, the land of the Eagles, and that period. It's real sort of 70s, early 80s vibes, and yeah. But no, I'm really, really enjoying it. I just got a few tips along the way from Kirk Larange.
Great.
Yeah, and that's actually the slide. His slides are what I use. I really love them because they've got, when you put them on, they're brass, and on the inside, if you look at the thickness, the thickness is actually thicker up the top than it is down the bottom. It kind of steps. There's like a little step on the inside, and it's to help, you know, because brass is so heavy. It's to help keep it the weight, it's almost used as a counterweight to keep it nice and straight against your fingerboard.
Cool.
Yeah,
that is genius. Wow.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, you mentioned Diesel. He provides some backing vocals on Rising Sun, and I believe you had some of his guitars floating around the studio as well.
Yeah. Thankfully, like I probably almost half of the guitars that you hear on the EP are his, thankfully. But it's not easy to ask somebody you idolize to sing backing vocals on your track. But I was like, stuff it. It'll be awesome. I got to do it. And obviously he said yes, and I was stoked. And also you kind of go through this little thing in your head where you go, what if it's not what you want? How do you then tell your idol, nah, man, it's... But it was killer first take, and it was like, yeah, it's awesome.
So good, man.
So I was stoked. But guitars, what did I use? Well, out of mine, what I mostly used was my 335. I have an early 80s 335. Sometimes I used my mid 60s SG. What was the rest? His guitar, which I used on Demons, because it's mainly just guitar up the front, and we didn't want to just do a standard sort of telly thing. We wanted just to feel a little bit woodier and clunkier, and the 335 wasn't quite getting it there. It was almost there, so we knew we needed some sort of semi-acoustic type vibe, and it ended up being an old Harmony Rocket. Oh,
okay, cool.
Yeah, which are like, were like the almost the cheap Kmart guitars from the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just
a big hollow body.
Yeah, that's right. And it has it's a sort of pretty quirky looking thing. It's red and all these knobs on it, and it just gave that clunk, that dead sort of clunk, and that was Diesel's guitar, and
Nice.
as soon as I picked it up, I'm like, oh man, I hate you because now I want to spend some money and buy one.
That's great. There's a beautiful tremolo on that track as well. What's that coming from?
That's coming from is it the Deluxe or that? Oh, I think it was my Fender Princeton.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, got an old 60s Princeton, and I think I could be wrong because that all happened so quickly. I think during the mix process, there's a little bit of some sort of mod going on, just very slightly.
Yeah.
In the background as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's very sweet. It's very sweet, that whole guitar. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I was happy with it.
Nice. So what's the next step with your EP? So you seem to be like trickling out the EP in singles over, when you're ready. When's the next
the next one will be mid-February. It's a song called 29 Gold Stars, and that's probably a little deeper, goes, Rising Sun has similar vibes. 29 Gold Stars is a pretty out there, quirky song. It's it's a little bit hybrid as well. I'm not using real drums on it, but it's not, it's not David Guetta or anything, Calvin Harris. But yeah, just that little bit more hybrid. That's definitely a song that I'm looking forward to releasing. And then Hug, which comes out with the EP, is a ballad, and there's an instrumental as well,
Great.
called Chucky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
cool, man. Fantastic. Sounds great. There's one of your blog videos. There's just an outtake of you just wailing over some epic kind of thing. There's backing vocals and you're jamming out. I don't know.
Is it kind of a ballad?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's kind of a little maybe Beatles-esque with just this soaring sort of guitar.
That's Hug.
thing.
That's Hug.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so
cool.
that'll be the release after this one. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I was hoping that might be one of the ones.
No, definitely. Yeah, I same thing. Look forward to that one as well. Those two, 29 Gold Stars and Hug, are one of my favorites. Some of my favorites. So,
cool, man.
And that was the song that also, during some parts I doubled with slide with fingers as well.
Oh,
to kind of have that Beatlesy, Eaglesy thing.
Yeah, great. Good stuff. Now, in addition to starting to release stuff again, last year you got on the road again. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I did. Bit the bullet, took the leap. Yeah, there were definitely some psychological barriers that I had to break down to get back up on the road because a lot of people don't know unless you followed my blog, but when I was kind of starting to burn out during my old band, touring with my old band Nat Cole and the Kings, I sort of didn't really know what was going on, and I just get these random washes of fear and feeling depleted, and then I couldn't sleep, so I was sleeping only 3-4 hours a night, and then having to sort of tour like that and get up on stage, and then I'm playing this festival down in Victoria, and I remember just before going on stage, the same thing. I just felt this, I felt all jelly in my body and depleted. My vision was a bit all over the shop, but then it was I had to go on stage. I just had to do it, so I went on stage and I did what I normally do, push past it, rise above it, and then about probably the third last song, I hit a big note on the mic, and then all these just tingles went up my body, and then sort of had a mini semi blackout on stage, and then I hit the ground, and then I came to, And then I remember just looking up and just seeing just all these people just looking at me. They probably thought it was the show. And, probably would have looked rock and roll, but it didn't feel it. And then just this massive overwhelm of how am I going to get through the rest of these songs. And it's hard to explain to people who haven't felt it what that type of overwhelm feels like, because there's nothing rational about it. You're not in your rational part of your mind. It's it's the only way I can describe it to somebody who hasn't felt those feelings is it literally feels like somebody has dropped poisoned your drink and you're tripping out or something like that. That's what it feels like. And so it's quite unnerving. And I managed to power through it. And this is before I was educated about any of that stuff, what's happening with the body, what's happening with the mind and all that. So as far as I was concerned, it would randomly just come on. And I was walking around the world just on guard all the time, wondering, is it going to hit now? Is it going to hit now? And that sort of fear would be stronger during certain times, like whether I'm presenting, in the studio to clients or going out to dinner with some friends or whatever, I would fear it happening more than what I would say just sitting at home. And also on stage. And then the fear just got so bad when it came to being on stage that being on stage wasn't fun anymore. And it was something that I dreaded, which was sad because I've been playing on stage since I was 8 years old. And at 29, 30, I had to turn away from it because just to work out what the hell was going on. So I hadn't played. I mean, I did the odd, maybe one tiny little, get up with a mate just to try and push myself once or twice in, 5 years. And then, like I was telling you before, when I decided that I do want to have another crack at this, and, I made a deal with myself. I said, just push through it. Because I couldn't imagine that fear had suffocated my desire to play so much that I couldn't even remember what it felt like to play a gig on stage and feel good about it. So it was hard for me to draw on all the memories that I had that were just corrupted by this fear. So, and when fear corrupts all your memories, then it's going to affect how you look towards the future. So, somebody booked me a show at that point in time, all I would think is, how am I going to do this? I would have forgotten the years of amazing gigs I've done and how amazing I felt. But I knew just through being mindful that that corruption was, how can I put it? It's like, I knew that was corrupting my desire to play. And the only way I was going to be able to really, truly feel, know whether I really want to play music again is to do it until I don't fear it anymore. And if I don't enjoy it still, and it's not because of fear, then I know, okay, it's over. It's not for me anymore. But in order to get to that place, I have to just get through it. I have to keep pushing through my fears until they're gone. So that was the deal I made at the start of last year. And when I trialed like 1 or 2 gigs, it only took 1 or 2 gigs. And by the end of those gigs, I was on the biggest high that for weeks. For weeks after it. And that's how I knew. I was like, I remember I played a show called the Rhythm Hut in Gosford. And that particular show, I'd played the Brass Monkey before that, and I got off and I felt pretty high. And then a week later was the Rhythm Hut, and that put me even higher. And that was the show that made me go, all right, it's time to have a crack at a tour.
Wow, fantastic.
And do this for real. And then, so that was October, November was the tour last year. So naturally, I'd gone from doing just a one-off gig to booking 10. And, there were it was Brisbane, surrounding suburbs of like Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Gold Coast, Central Coast. And, and so being on the road for that, it was definitely all about preparation. I had to anticipate a little bit where I might get stuck and have a bit of a plan on what's going to, what do I do when I get stuck to stop myself from going down, that negative rabbit hole and having panic attacks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what things can I put in place for that? And just setting intentions as well. And the intention for that tour was not to enjoy it, like, not that I wanted to go out of my way not to enjoy it, but it was about embracing the fear and the pain and whatever happens, but just get through it. Just keep pushing. And then naturally, when you're leaning in, the good stuff comes, and it did every time. Every time I went on stage, no matter how nervous I was beforehand, no matter how much my thoughts might have carried me away, the act of me just leaning in and getting on stage and moving through it, every time I would feel bliss. So now it's about repetition. I almost got to it, probably the last couple gigs was when I really started feeling relaxed and at home.
Okay.
But it was only the last couple gigs. So I think, it's just the rest is just repetition.
Sure. Wow, when you
and the feedback was great. The people. I think it's definitely the most connected I've been with my audience, probably since I was a kid. But even then, when I was a kid, I was playing guitar. I wasn't singing. I wasn't saying what I wanted to say. But I'm kind of telling my story a little bit in amongst the set as well, and it just it's resonating with a lot of people, and I'm getting it's showing me why I play music, is to, when you create something and then you put it on stage and you perform it and you take people with you and you're all feeling, a whole room, we're all feeling the same thing. That's where the magic is, and that's kind of why I do it.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. I remember reading in your first blog when you describe what you've just told us now about that first anxiety attack so vividly. I've got to say your blog, it's written, and now the videos, they're written so beautifully and honestly.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, so just seeing you slowly work through that and make those steps back on stage is pretty great. One thing you wrote in one of your early blogs was that you couldn't find much information from other artists who are going through the same thing as you were. Do you think you being so open about your health challenges, both physical and mental health challenges, do you see yourself now being one of those voices to what must be a fairly sizable population of people who need to see a blueprint like this?
Yeah. Well, I'd at least like to think that I'm triggering that sort of movement for other artists to want to share it. I'm a work in progress. There's still a lot of questions that I have, and a lot of, the reason why I'm not going out and doing speaking events or, fully doing that whole thing is because I need more proof that what I've learnt is working for me. I think there's a lot of information that's online and that people are writing and putting out there, and when they shouldn't be, whether they're not qualified or they don't fully have the experience. And I just didn't want to be one of those people, which is why all I've done through my blog is just shared, just an experience, be it an experience or a technique that I've found helpful that's worked for me. But I'm not going to preach that I know all the answers and to broadly say that, hey, this is how you get yourself from being, paralyzed by anxiety and to being fully liberated. I don't have that answer just yet. I'm almost there. I feel like I'm heading in the right direction. But yeah, no, it was tough. It was really tough when you come away from the doctors and you're at a point where you've had so many tests and you're trying to work out what's wrong with you, and then they tell you that all your blood work is amazing. You know, that's ironically was a really low point for me, because I wanted an answer.
Of course, yeah.
You know, an answer. Why am I feeling like this? And that comes from the fact that there's so much mystery. There's just not enough people sharing their stories, and not just. It's not about stories of suffering. You know, we want to hear stories of suffering and how somebody moved through it. You know, because if that was common knowledge, then I probably would have saved myself a couple of years of trying to work out what is wrong, and also seeing the right people. I would have known early on the right practitioners were. What type of people I want around me to help me through this. So, and particularly in music, it would be good, because I know many struggle with it, and I also know many have moved past it, moved through it, and I can understand when there aren't any answers around how somebody can just be driven to the abyss.
Sure.
You know, and when you break it down, like the sensations, like what you feel, they're not that bad compared to other things that we feel. I mean, let's just look at, if you're the first person on the planet to have a full-blown flu, nobody talked about because nobody knew what it was. I mean, I reckon you'd be pretty bloody scared. You got,
Absolutely.
shit coming out of your nose, you're trembling, you're fevering, you're bedbound, you're sweating, that would be scary. But the fact that everybody talks about it and it, and you see people get the flu and then they get better, they know what to do, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't last. And the same thing when it comes to anxiety and all that. What makes it last is the resistance to it when it comes on. So if you get rid of the resistance and you accept it, it's just can be a normal part of being a human being. It'll, we won't make it any bigger than what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I think really sticks through with those early accounts from you is that physically and mentally you're obviously struggling, but there's an overwhelming sense of confusion, and surprise. Why am I feeling like this? And it just hit home to me. And my day job is in education, and so I'm working with young people all the time. And there's a lot of focus on mental health. And thankfully, these days it's a different topic than it was, maybe even just 20 years ago. But what really struck me with your story is that, just that simple fact that these struggles are no respecter of persons. They can come seemingly very suddenly and to anybody in any situation. And like the flu, anyone can get the flu. Let's look at it like that.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to realize that as well. And I remember watching Fighting Fear, that Mark Matthews surf documentary.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And even Storm Surfers, like with Tom Carroll and Ross Clark Jr. And what occurred to me when I'm watching this is who we think is people who we think are fearless, they're not fearless. It's what they do with the fear when it comes on. They love it. Some people hate fear. Some people love fear. Some people pay big money to get that rush, that fear, because they associate it with completely different things. So, it's a topic, particularly fear in general. It's something that I would have loved to have understood a little bit more early on. It's a very fascinating topic, I reckon. And I love how much more awareness there is. Probably my only concern is that I just hope it's the right type of awareness. It depends on the circles that you move in, because I'm not really a fan of particularly with kids. I know it's a bit of a controversial topic, but the labels, anxiety disorder and this, that scares me a little bit, particularly if if somebody who's a really young kid has been, branded this way. I mean, if somebody says to me, I've got anxiety disorder, like I had leukemia when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I knew there was something wrong. That's like when somebody says you got cancer, okay, well, there's something wrong going on there. And it is a big mountain that you have to climb, also because of the label itself. So when you're going through a phase where you're, there's a lot of fear in your life, and then you're, somebody who you respect diagnoses you with anxiety disorder, all of a sudden there's something wrong in your head. Oh, okay, this is all wrong. There's something wrong with me. Yeah. Which to me makes it even worse. It's whereas, like in high school, I remember high school and even primary school, you're going to go through times that are tough. Like it's growing pains. They are tough years. And I remember being crazy self-conscious for years and scared of school, and I didn't have many friends. I was picked on, but I never once thought of myself as being bullied, because I'd come home and my dad, particularly my dad, would teach me how to deal with that fear and to deal with, adversity, which kept me always on the front foot, rather than trying to run from it. Because the act of running to me is, and the resistance to whatever you're feeling is then how it becomes a real issue within yourself. And those were life tools that I've got now. I wrote about it in a blog ages ago about it's those years of being uncomfortable in school taught me, so onwards from that, I could walk into a room as the oddball out and not feel insecure, because I was exposed to that for so long, at high school. I mean, I know there's other ways to learn things, but, Yeah.
That was your way. Yeah, cool.
Well, that was my way, yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned, let's go back then for a bit. You mentioned being diagnosed with cancer when you were 6. When I was 3 and 4, I was diagnosed with Willem's tumours, which was very treatable these days, a very common cancer in children. But in the 70s, it was pretty serious. So I had a lot of invasive surgery, and to be honest, I don't remember.
Yeah, right.
I don't remember a lot of it. I remember losing my hair. I remember.
How old were you again?
I was 3 and 4, I think, maybe 5 when I had my last surgery. I had a bunch of surgery.
Sure.
I had a kidney removed. I had a portion of my right lung.
Oh wow.
Removed. Yeah, it was full on. But to be honest, because I was so young, I don't remember a lot of it. And looking back now, I'm a dad, as you are, I just think, man, hard for me, but it must have just been incredibly hard for my parents.
Yeah.
Now, you were 6, you were a little bit older than me. What do you remember of that? Is your experience similar, or were you old enough to know a little bit more? And
I was old enough to know, to remember what I was going through and what, everything. But I was always kept in the dark when it came to what, the realities.
Okay.
Which is smart, because it kept me focused on the things that I want to do in life rather than where I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I would say during that time is when my bond with my guitar deepened. Yeah. Because it took my mind off the pain and all the procedures, and which were really rough. Back then, and the hospital that I was at, they didn't have enough beds to put you out for really painful operations like lumbar punches and stuff like that. So I'd be awake for them.
Oh man.
At that age, and I'd have to do them every week for months.
Wow.
Wow.
Man.
So, I'm sure maybe. There's always been this. My psychologist often wonders how much of that type of anxiety is sort of trapped in my body. It's like kind of emotional muscle memory, really.
Okay.
That it's just there's nothing else has happened since then in my life to trigger that type of emergency reaction until my late 20s, and then boom, it's there. But yeah, I mean, because I remember just you'd get through it, and then I'd be on a high because I got through it, and then I'd be counting down the days, okay, I've got five more days until I have to go in there, 4 more days until I go in there, and then I wouldn't sleep very well, and that was the pattern. Anticipation was the pattern. Being in a state of anticipation was the pattern for a long time because of that, and maybe that's got something to do with my nature in general. They're really those years are really what's the word? Influential in your makeup when you're that young. But then the Starlight Foundation, that's when they came into my life, which was when I was 7, when they granted me that wish to meet Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits.
Yeah, and that's when Australia, we pretty much got to meet you when that happened. Yeah, man. Amazing.
Yeah, one day it'd be good to meet him again. I haven't met him since.
You haven't met him since? Okay.
No. I mean, I think he came out, Dire Straits came out that year or a little bit later, and I hooked up with him backstage. But yeah, I never really crossed paths. Well, I haven't crossed paths with him since. But it'd be an interesting meet. That's for
sure. Can we talk about a little bit about that time? I guess. Yeah. So you became a household name. Yeah, pretty much at the age of 7 or 8. Playing guitar. I actually first saw you live when you sat in with Robben Ford, and this would have probably been the early 90s.
Oh, the basement.
Yes, yeah. And I was a guitar player, so when I saw you on TV, and absolutely when I saw you with Robben Ford, I knew you weren't just a gimmick or some kid who'd learnt a trick and got on TV. There was a lot of depth to your musicianship even then, and by then you've already been playing half your life. So, but that set you on a course to work with some really interesting people. What if I just mention a few names and you can perhaps reflect? Daryl Summers, because you're on Hey Hey It's Saturday a lot, and I believe even in recent years he's been an encouraging figure for you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Daryl, Hey Hey It's Saturday is like, there's not a show out there like it. It's especially for musicians. Like Hey Hey It's Saturday wasn't biased to whatever is in the top 100, top 50, or whatever you want to call it. He had different types of musicians on there, and multiple on one show. So, and Hey Hey It's Saturday was also the thing that you did. All the overseas touring acts, when they came to Australia, they would play Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Yeah.
It was a real big deal, and definitely was a key supporter for music. You'd end up on Hey Hey It's Saturday, and your tour, did well. As long as you were good. And so the fact that he supported, an artist that's pretty unlikely, like, myself, and also not a sure bet, I was pretty flattered by that. And he supported me for almost 10 years. So I didn't realize that until about 3 years ago, when that he just randomly reached out to me and wanted to meet up and see how it was going in Sydney, and gave me the whole back catalogue was up, and gave me a DVD just with all my appearances on there. And I'm watching him going, man, that's epic. Like, I had a flick through. I can't watch myself, but just having a flick through, going, wow, this was a long time. It's a long time. Sometimes I'll be on there twice a year, and right up until I was, I think the last appearance was 17 years old, 16 years old maybe. And I was on there first time at 8 years old. So,
Awesome. I think that's when you became everyone's little brother, or in Australia. And I think you're diagnosed with remission in about 13. It's like the whole nation, like, big deep sigh and super happy. Man, I remember doing.
I didn't think of it like that, but I suppose,
for sure, because everyone watched Hey Hey. That's what we did on a Saturday night.
I know, isn't that crazy? Awesome. I mean, Hey Hey, they've that's kind of definitely, without them, I wouldn't be where I am now, because it was a Hey Hey It's Saturday performance where Jimmy Barnes and I crossed paths, and then he signed me to his wife's record label with Mushroom Records, and that's when I went on my first tour.
Yeah, well, they were the next people I was going to mention, Jimmy and Jane Barnes.
Yeah, because I'd went from Hey Hey, outside of Hey Hey, I was just busking in Queen Street, Campbelltown, and then the next thing I'm on a 5-week rock and roll tour around Australia, playing some of the roughest places, and biggest as well, and my dad, I mean, this is the more I think about this stuff, the more I just look to my parents and go, oh my God, you guys really did take some chances and put yourself threw yourself in the deep end, because, my dad was, even though he taught me, he wasn't a professional musician, and he'd never played on stage before. So just sort of maybe at a party or something like that, and he used to have a garage band with a couple mates, and that's it. Yeah. So now he's in charge with trying to put together a band for me to play at entertainment centres around Australia. Yeah. And so he just did his best, and I had I had him on rhythm guitar. I had on bass guitar, I had his fellow bricklayer mate playing bass. And then on drums we had Jimmy Barnes's guitar tech. Drum tech. Okay. Yanni. Okay. And then and that was my band. That was my band for the tour, and and then at the end of that tour was for the after party. That's when I met the guy who became my manager in America. He was an Australian guy that was putting on an event, a celebration event for Guitar Player magazine. It was their 25th anniversary. Yeah, yeah. And
I remember seeing you in Guitar Player. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
You had the super sparkly PV Nathan Cavaleri model.
Yeah, I'll go the 90s. And and then we went over to the States, and I played that. And there was some amazing guitarists there, like John Lee Hooker, Ry Cooder, Steve Morse, Jeff Baxter, Frank Mbali. Yeah. I mean, at the time, there's a lot of people I just didn't know who they were. Yeah. And funny story though, Ry Cooder was playing, and everyone's always told me how much he can be a bit of a cranky pants, and so he's on stage and he's just doing a solo thing, something by himself, and he's playing this blues, and the crowd starts clapping, but you know what crowds can be like. They clap a bit out of time, and John Lee Hooker's also pretty loose, and it was throwing him off. So then he just stopped midway through the song, and he goes, "Don't do that." And everybody's just like, "Oh." Yeah. So that was my first encounter with and actually on that same trip I got to play with Albert Collins. Wow.
Tell me about that. What's that?
Well, that was just at San Francisco Blues Festival. I have no idea how it was hooked up because I wasn't even signed at the time, and we might have been through, probably maybe somebody through somebody at the Guitar Player magazine. Mm-hmm. Went to San Francisco Blues Festival, and he had me up on stage, and I got to play with him in the Icebreakers.
Wow, man.
And that was incredible. That's the first blues band I ever played with, proper blues band. Okay. And and still to this day, it's like my first blues band, and I was 10 years old, and it was Albert Collins. And
that's not bad.
That's pretty good. Yeah. And the groove, I remember the shuffles, and and that was an education on the difference between a Texas shuffle and a Chicago blues type shuffle.
What's the difference?
Well, I find the Chicago shuffle, the Texas shuffle is more on the left hand with the snare. If you think of the difference between Albert Collins' T-Bone shuffle. Yeah. But, versus Cold Shot Stevie Ray Vaughan is a lot more sort of, back.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
you know, almost like a half swing rather than a full. You know, it's a bit sleazier, and I probably identified a little more with the Texas shuffle for years. And I find the Texas sort of shuffles and stuff like that a bit dirtier, a bit sleazier, but both good, of course.
Nice, man. I could probably go on all day asking it about these different stories, but bottom line is though, you here you are, 2019, about to kick into a new year. Last year sounds like it was, you know, really positive and lots of new stuff, or lots of stuff for the first time in a long time, and so thank you for being so honest throughout for speaking to me today, but just with your blog for the last couple of years, and speaking so openly about not only your health issues, but there's some great stories in your blogs about being on the road and meeting some of these amazing people and all sorts of stuff. So I'm just saying this to say I'm really excited to see where things are at for you at the moment, and very much looking forward to seeing what 2019 ends up being for you.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. It's good to know that all those blogs and stuff resonate as well, because I mean, I write it because it's a cathartic release, and
sure.
And also with some of them, I'm hoping that it inspires people, but I can't really know unless people give me feedback on it, and so it's really good to hear. That it's resonating, and
cool.
Well, thanks for having me, mate.
Man, great,
it's
pleasure.
Good to chat.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll hopefully see you at a gig soon.
Absolutely, cool, mate.
All right, there you go, my conversation with Nathan Cavaleri. What an honest and insightful man he is, and I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. I hope you did too. Let me tell you about a few links I've included in the show notes. First up, nathancavaleri.com, where you can find links to the new EP, and as we spoke about, those first 2 tracks that have been released are absolutely killer. Such good tracks, great playing, great singing, very, very soulful. And the blogs on that website are great. Some of them are just amazing music stories from on the road as a kid and as an adult. And some of them are dealing with Nathan's health journey, both physical and mental. And you know what? For all of us, you know, life is not a straight line at all for any of us. And for me, I find it encouraging when other people open up and share their experiences, because I think it makes it all the more relatable to those of us who might be treading the same boards. Another link I've put on the show notes today is for Beyond Blue, which is an Australian organisation offering help for mental health issues. Now, I know we have listeners from all around the world. I'm just connecting Australian listeners, I guess. But if you're overseas, I strongly encourage you to find local bodies that would help you if you need that. All right, a few people to thank for this episode coming to being. My friend Adam Roach from Become a Guitarist Today podcast, who put me in touch with Rob from Good Intent Publicity, who then put me in touch with Louise from Nala Music Management. And, it takes a village sometimes, and all those people helped get this interview to come to pass. So my sincere thanks to all those people. Thank you for listening. Remember to check out guitarspeakpodcast.com for all of our previous 102 episodes, links to how to subscribe, all of our social media, merch and all that kind of stuff. Thanks for joining me. My name's Matt Wakeling. I'll catch you next time on the Guitar Speak podcast. Bye now.